Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sarah Rosette.
And I'm Jami Albright. And this week on the show we
are re-airing an interview we did with Kait Nolan. And it's about, I think it's probably a good one for us to re-air. Yeah. It's about dealing with burnout and writing during stressful times. Mm-hmm. And I had never met Kait, but I remember when we did this one, I just thought she was so wise and had so much good information that
she was, that's one of the reasons I had recommended her. And interestingly enough, we interviewed her right before lockdown.
Yes.
I remember because my daughter and her kids were at the house. My other daughter was pregnant and everybody was at my house and our electricity went off. And so I had to go to Starbucks, sit outside Starbucks in the rain while we interviewed this. And then right after that, like just a few days after that, we went into lockdown. So that's, dealing with stressful times, it was very appropriate. But Kait is super wise. She just knows who she is. She knows who our readers are and why they read her. And then she writes to that. And I just love that. So
and I think it's a really good interview. Yeah. She has some tips about writing during trying times. And she talked about how like a just for fun project can help you kind of keep going when your world is kind of crazy, and just some really good, just a really good interview. So that's coming up. But I guess we should mention that last week we didn't have an interview or a podcast because we kind of got our signals crossed and our lives were crazy. Last week
out of town.
Yeah. So hopefully we're all back and it will all be good coming up, and we'll have interviews and get kind of back on our regular schedule here in a little bit. Right. But what's going on with you?
Well, as you guys can tell, I sound a little croaky because I have COVID. I got it from Mickey Mouse, is what I'm saying. So you guys know about my sister and all the yucky stuff going on there. But in the middle of that, just nightmare and terrible stuff, my 3 granddaughters were adopted on July the 29th. And so we had planned a trip to Disney on August the 2nd as a celebration for that, their adoption. So my husband and I and the other grandmother, and then my daughter and her 5 kids and son-in-law and their 5 kids all went to Disney. We were there 6 days. We came home Monday. And yesterday, which was Saturday, I tested positive for COVID. So kind of cruddy because I can't be around my sister. Yeah. But so that's what's going on with me. I mean, literally when I found out, I just kind of laughed because I was like, if I don't laugh, I'm going to cry.
Yeah.
I mean, are you kidding me right now? I mean, it's just like, it's one roller coaster hill after another. But it's all good. I don't feel terrible. I feel like I have a kind of a head cold and need to lay down, but I'm not super sick. So that's good.
Yeah.
And I have a very low voice. And, but
you're in isolation, basically.
And I'm in isolation. Yes. I'm in my parents' guest room. My mother's leaving food for me on the hatch outside the door. And,
and so Jamie's like, I said, can you do an intro today? And she's like, yes,
please, somebody talk to me. I actually have a cooler in here with drinks because I just do not want to go out and expose anybody. So it's just been, it's, I don't know. What's been going on with you, Sarah? Let's talk about you.
Okay. Well, I'm out of town and I'm having a really good vacation, a good break. We're in the mountains. It's beautiful and been doing a lot of hikes, nearly killed myself on one of them just because it was so long and it was much harder than we thought it would be. But we survived and I have pictures to prove it that I saw the waterfall. And so it was really good. Yeah. So it's been good. But I've been doing a couple of hours of work in the afternoon And I did launch the preview page or the pre-launch page for my Kickstarter.
Right.
So I'll put a link to that in the show notes if anyone wants to sign up and kind of be notified when it goes live.
Or just see it,
Yeah. Well,
see what one
right
looks
now.
like.
So what I've learned, I'm taking a course from Monica and Russell. And what I've learned is you put up your pre-launch page for a couple of weeks before you actually launch, and you get followers on this page. So basically all it is like a single page, and you just say, notify me.
Oh,
so
great.
that's at sararosette.com/KS, and that'll take you to it. So you can sign up there, and then like in a couple of weeks when the page goes live, you can see what all it is. And let me tell you, it's a lot of work, but I am really glad I'm doing it. I'm learning a lot, and I feel like if nothing else, I'm getting a template so that if I ever want to do it again, I can just like go, okay, last time I needed these 15 things, and I'll know more what I need.
Right.
So,
right. Plus, I just feel like Kickstarter is a way to find new readers too. I really feel that way. So
it is. And especially there's some really big romance Kickstarters that have been going on that I've been doing some research, and I mean, they are just knocking it out of the park with their stuff. I mean, like if you go look up Katie Roberts, it's Katee Roberts. She's done some amazing stuff. And
I think Melanie Harlow has too. So
so there's possibilities there. There's huge possibilities. And I just listened to the Creative Penn Podcast with Morgana Best about selling direct. And basically Kickstarter is a platform where you can sell direct. Right. It's like, and I think it's probably a good first step. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to try this. And then hopefully, it will go well. And then I can set up my own store and kind of get more into selling direct. Right. So, but we're going to also have Morgana on we're going to interview her soon, and we can ask her all the questions about selling direct. So I feel like Kickstarter is kind of a first step into that, where you don't have to commit to building a store and everything like that. So,
well, I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, I'll be relieved when it's launched. I'm a little nervous and a little stressed, but it's going well. And I'm really glad that I'm taking the course. And it's kind of just tells you everything you need to do, which is I can follow instructions.
Yeah,
so
me too.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah, that's kind of me too. I can follow instructions. Exactly. Well, that's awesome. That is so good.
Yeah. Well, so that's about it for my update.
Yeah. Well, we should get on with the interview because it's very good, and I certainly need to hear it right about now. So,
okay. Well, here's Kait.
We're super excited to have Kait Nolan with us here today. Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Hey, Kait.
Hello.
Yeah. So, thanks for bearing with us with our tech issues. We're having some issues with connectivity because everybody in the whole world is on Zoom and the internet. So anyway, but we're really glad you're here. And would you start us off and just tell us a little bit about what genres you write in?
Sure. I write predominantly in contemporary romance with a heavy emphasis on small town romance set in the South.
Okay.
Very good. And you write some romantic suspense though too.
Well, yeah, I've got a series that I would classify as like romantic suspense light.
Okay.
For like hardcore romantic suspense lovers, it's not going to be as suspenseful, but it's a spinoff of my Wishful series, which is a very happy, fluffy place. So, I couldn't bring like serial killers and horribleness to there without really violating the town that I had created. So I have a light romantic suspense there, but I'm doing some exploration with some more mainstream romantic suspense, actually with some stuff that I'll be talking about later.
Good.
Cool.
So, how did you get into writing? Like, have you been were you one of those kids that wrote in journals, or did you?
I was not a journaler. I started writing when I was 12. As I met my best friend Adrian back then in the 6th grade, and it's been so many years, I cannot remember why we decided this was a good idea. By the end of our first phone call, we decided we were going to write a book together about a pair of sisters their dad owns a summer camp. And we worked on this thing in like our little 3-subject notebook every year for a number of years. And then she kind of fell away. And of course, our characters aged as we did. And writing was not her thing, but I did discover that it was mine. And so it was something that I did kind of all the way through growing up because I was an only child. I spent a lot of time by myself and never had a problem with that. I'm highly introverted and perfectly capable of entertaining myself. And so it was kind of one of those things that I did and I loved doing. And I actually submitted my first book for publication when I was 15. I still have that rejection letter somewhere. But I didn't take it seriously as a career because it was sort of one of those things like my parents were like, oh, hey, you're really talented. Great. Now go get a real job.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And so I said, fine, I'll finish my master's degree. And about the time I was finishing that up, I'm like, nothing in the world is going to make me happier than being a writer. So I just said, okay, fine, I'll be an overachiever and do everything. Yeah. And so I was 25 and working on my master's thesis. And when I finally kind of made the decision, okay, I'm going to start treating this like a job. And so that was probably when I really started. I mean, I'd written all along, but it was when I started writing professionally.
Yes.
And kind of going all along that.
What year was that?
2005.
Okay. Oh yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah.
I mean, not long. That's forever ago.
It feels like it.
No, I just mean you've been doing this a while. That's amazing.
Yes, I've been self-publishing since 2010.
Wow, that's great. You were like one of the first ones.
I was out there in the wild west of indie publishing in the very early days. And it's been really interesting to sort of see how everything has evolved and all the people that I started with who fell off the map, you know, the few that are still going. Yeah. And there have been a lot of changes in the industry.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that. That's one of our questions. So what was your first big success?
Well, I guess that kind of depends on how you define success.
And so how do you define success?
For me, the part that felt like the biggest success was because when I got started, actually with the self-publishing back in 2010, I was working 3 jobs and writing. And I had I'd finished graduate school and I had taken a research position and I was working 2 different teaching jobs online and writing around all of that. And so the first really major success for me was when I started earning enough that I could quit all of my part-time jobs and be down to the full-time job and writing.
Oh, that's awesome. That's amazing. That's a great feeling.
It was. I had been doing it so long and I emailed my department head and I said, I'm not going to be teaching next semester. And he emailed me back immediately like, oh my God, is everything okay? I'm like, no, everything's fine. I've paid off everything I wanted to pay off. I'm taking a break. He's like, oh, okay. Congratulations.
It's all going according to plan.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so great. Well, what do you wish you'd known about craft, the craft writing?
That one's easy. Story structure.
Yes.
Story structure. Because I spent years thinking, well, I need to learn how to plot for efficiency's sake, because I had very limited time to write. But it wasn't that I needed to learn how to plot, because everybody says you've got the whole pantser plotter thing. I am a reformed pantser. But it was, I needed to learn story structure. And I found Larry Brooks' StoryFix website years ago, and then his book, Story Engineering, and it changed my world. Okay. Because it taught me the pieces that I needed to underpin any plot, no matter what, you're writing. It's the least I need to know in order to create the skeleton that the story adheres to.
Yeah.
So I highly, highly recommend it.
Okay, we'll put it in the show notes because I'll want to look at it.
Yeah. Well, so what do you wish you had known about marketing? Kind of taking it to the other side of the writing life.
Stuff on that. I wish that I had been kind of more strategic about how I wrote my Wishful series. It's my flagship series. There's 12 books. And from a marketing perspective, series do best when you have a very clear groupability factor. So you've got a group of brothers, group of friends, siblings, whatever. Wishful started kind of on a whim because I was originally in paranormal romance. And I started actually with Be Careful, It's My Heart, which is now book 3. It was this total sort of one-off. I love White Christmas, like Bing Crosby's White Christmas, the movie. I watch it every Christmas one year. And I was probably skating with some burnout at the time, because I was chasing New York and doing all this kind of stuff with my paranormal. And I wanted something completely different. And I decided that it would be fun to write a story about a community theater production of White Christmas and basically do a retelling of the story against a community theater production of the story. And so I created Be Careful, It's My Heart, and fell in love with the town. And I'm like, well, I need to write more of this. And so I went back and started at the beginning. But as I went through the series, I just kind of wrote whoever I felt like writing about, which meant I didn't always have like good hooks to pull people from one couple to the next. And then I wrote some stuff out of order. And I've since kind of fixed the chronology and reordered the books. And I've added a scene or two here and there to kind of seed better. But I definitely see a clearer and better sell through on my Misfit In series, where it was immediately following one sister after the next, a very clear, grouping factor. And other than that, probably like the value of rapid release as a strategy. Because I took so long, I was limited with my time. I took a long time to write stuff. I would write it and drop it and go. And then to the next. The idea of waiting long enough to bank things to do that very strategic release very rapidly is not something that I understood the value of at the beginning.
Right.
And I think that it's a really, if you can do it, I think it's a really valuable thing. I ended up doing it sort of by accident last year, or maybe it was the year before. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. Now I see why this is a thing.
Yeah.
So I kind of wish I had done that before.
How did you release the books?
What was that?
How did you release the books?
Which ones?
The ones you did rapid release with?
Let's see. I think I ended up dropped one a month.
Oh, okay.
I had life had happened. My Wishing for a Hero series got started back in like 2016, and then I didn't touch it for 2 years because stuff. And so I ended up coming back with like a novella, a novel, and then another novella really quickly. And ended up getting like a book bub on the first one, and the sales went through the roof. Wow. Which was amazing.
Yeah.
So do you try and do that now? Is that your plan, like to write, stockpile, and release incrementally, or what?
Well,
what's the best case scenario? In other words,
this is one of those do as I say, not as I do. With my Kait stuff, because over the last couple of years I've been sort of fighting with burnout. That has not been what I have done. I am working on an experiment that I hope can launch at the end of this year, where I am doing that. So,
and we all have that. We all have the plan A, and then we end up doing like plan F or something. Yeah. Yeah.
So what assumptions did you make at the beginning of your writing career that you look back now and go, no, those weren't right, or that was right, or,
So many. I thought I'd be writing full time in 5 years. That was definitely not true. I lost all momentum on my paranormal romance. My paranormal was actually doing very well when I started in the very early days of self-publishing, to the point that I ended up landing my agent without ever writing a query letter.
Oh, wow.
Until she found me. But it kind of got me off track of self-publishing because I was pursuing New York at the time. And so when I got out of that and I started over in contemporary romance, it was much slower growth. I missed that big boom in like 2012 and all that, which I'm actually okay with. So it's been, slower growth than I expected. And it really kind of changed my mind about what factors I felt like I needed in order to quit my job. And given the lack of stability in terms of what might happen in our economy with all of the craziness currently going on, I'm really happy to stay where I am and have somebody else pay for my benefits for a while.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because I do know Kait, and she is so level-headed, in my opinion, so level-headed about this business, and now I know why. I mean, you've been you've seen a lot, but she's very level-headed. If we're in a group and if any things start getting a little crazy, she's always the voice of reason. And so, and I think that's awesome. And I think it's because, though, you've kind of seen things, you've weathered things, you look at things in the right perspective. Yeah. So I think that's great.
It also helps that I've always sort of marched to the beat of my own drum. I've never been much one for doing what everybody else is doing, because a lot of people were doing things that either were out of my reach because of time or money or whatever. And so not concerned myself so much with trends. And I think that also makes it very easy to kind of wait and be like, okay, let's stop and breathe and think and break it down from there. In terms of other stuff that I expected, I thought that New York would continue to make foolish mistakes, and they have. They persistently run publishing around the old paper models, even though that's not where money's actually being made, which is foolish on their part. And there's a lot. They're in the paper business. They're not in the book business, and it's not being run anymore by true book lovers. And the ones that are in the New York publishing houses that truly love books are hamstrung by all of the business people who don't care.
Yeah.
And so you see a lot of, like mistakes, like that whole thing. And actually, I think they just repealed it, but Macmillan banning libraries from buying new releases because they thought it was going to cannibalize sales. It's like, really? Are you serious with this? And I just saw something about that having been repealed since all of this craziness started. But I mean, it took months for them to do that.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing, that assumption that I made, I thought that I would eventually be able to dial up to nano level productivity every month. And that's a no, big no. I have way too much else in my brain, and pushing myself to get to that is one of the factors that really led me into the burnout that I know you guys want me to talk about later. So,
well, that's actually our next question. So why don't you tell us kind of what led up to the burnout, and like what happened once you were in it, and how'd you get out?
So, okay. Well, as I said, I started doing all of this. I was working 3 jobs and gradually amping up how much I could write. I'm a researcher by trade. And so I am big into data. I've got an Excel spreadsheet that goes back to 2010, tracking my daily word count all those years. So I have data saying I can do this much in this span of time. And it was great for a long time because it enabled me to really figure out, with reasonable accuracy, how much I could write in a year, which was great for production schedules and all that kind of thing. And so, year after year after year, I wrote more and more and more, and I put out, more and more books, and to the point that I think I had one year where I released 8 books. And
oh my gosh, that's a lot.
It was. And then I finally got to this sort of point where there was a lot of personal stuff going on. Life was happening, and it was this sort of major upset. And suddenly my brain was too occupied by the real life stuff to sink into story and lose myself. And the idea, I went from writing about 450,000 words in a year. And I think last year I cleared maybe 225. And that was really hard for me because it felt like going backwards. I'm like, I have all this data saying, no, I should be able to do this. And it was a massive, I'm a big fan, I know you guys are too, of Becca Syme's StrengthsFinder course and all that. And I ended up taking Write Better Faster. I took StrengthsFinder, and she was the one who was like, you're in burnout. I'm like, oh, okay. And so it's like,
it's a new thought.
This now. And I've actually gone through 2 rounds of this in the last kind of couple of years. Like, part of what I had discovered, I am number 1 input. And for people who aren't familiar with this, people who input are constantly taking in new information. In my case, it's like reading and podcasts, research, and that sort of thing, because I'm also a high learner. And because I had sort of limited time, I'd gotten to the point where I was using reading as a reward for getting my words in. And if I didn't get my words in, I wasn't reading. And that was basically like saying, you're not allowed to breathe if you don't get your words in. And so I wasn't inputting. And so my well was just dry, and people with input wells, we have wells that are 95% bigger than everyone else. And so as soon as we figured that out, Becca was like, you're not inputting. I'm like, okay. And then I think I blew through 200 books that year because I'm like, I need to read all the things. And then I was like, great, I feel better. This is good. I'm moving out. And then I sort of kind of went through another round because I tried to push myself back to do what I used to do. And it was my coach was finally like, look, you were able to do the things that you did in the last 10 years because you blew through 10, or you're basically a lifetime of reserves. You will never get that back.
Right.
And it was kind of brutal, but I needed to hear it because it's true. And that was really, really hard for me to accept because I have the data. The data says I should do it. And I've had to really work my way through a lot of sort of emotional pain of realizing I will not be able to go back to writing 8 books a year. It's just crazy. Right. And so I'm finally sort of making peace with all of that and coming back to a more sane level of production and trying to be, work smarter, not harder, with the whole thing. But it's like every third writer I know, probably more than that, is going through some form of burnout because, we're constantly pushing ourselves to work harder and to work faster and to do all of these things to gain visibility in an increasingly flooded marketplace. And we're making ourselves nuts.
Yeah, it's true. You're certainly not the only one. Lots of people are going through this.
Well, so. I went through it in November, and I wasn't putting out 8 books a year. Y'all know I don't write very fast, but it's not even about, it's not about the words you put down. It's about, to me, it was about all the energy I was giving this business, and then life was like pounding at me, and I couldn't divide my energies, and my real life has to take precedent over this
over your fictional friends.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And so I really literally got to the point where I would sit in front of the screen and just go, I have nothing to write. I have nothing, which is horrible. That's a horrible feeling. So
it's terrifying because like I know at least, and most of the writers I know, like we explore the world and we kind of process the world through writing. Yep. Right now, I'm waiting to see, how many Love in a Time of Quarantine romances are going to hit the market in the next 6 months. But and to reach a point where we can't do that, it means we've got all this stuff sort of trying. And if we're not finding another way to get that out, whether it's like therapy or coaching or whatever it is, then we're sitting there just sort of stewing in our juices, which is one of the worst things you can do psychologically.
Yes.
And then it just sort of like continues this perpetuating cycle. It's bad.
Yeah. I think like you were saying, you had the data, about I should be able to do this. And we don't like changes in the market, but we know the market's going to change and there are going to be trends and stuff, but we don't as easily accept that we're going to change or that our life is going to change. And that impacts what we can do. And, there's just certain seasons that you just can't do what you did 5 years ago, or, and then sometimes things calm down and you can just like celebrate and be very productive, but we just can't assume that it's always going to be the same. And I have to accept that too about myself. I want to write my words and get them in, and some days it just isn't going to happen, Yeah. So
you have to be kind.
I found for my own purposes that mentally I do better when I don't have that, because I used to have that expectation of like, I'm going to write every day, because I do better when I can, because I'm able to like keep my brain in the story for a longer period of time. But when I set myself a goal somewhere years ago, I was like, I'm going to write 20 days out of 30. That is my sort of like low bar. I can do that. And I'm not even worried about word count. Just I'm going to write 20 days out of 30. And most of the time I do more than that. But because I have that sort of grace period in there, when life happens and I can't, because, I have to do something with my kid or I have to do whatever it is, then I don't have that resentment because I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah. Right. Which is so important.
Trying to build in, sort of that grace in our schedule is much better than beating ourselves up over not having this perfect situation.
Right. Yeah.
And I think when you have that mindset, it's easier then when life does come at you with stuff to process both things. Like,
yes,
I went through that in November, and then I did sort of what you did. I came back in January going, and then I was like, I'm not ready. But I have been this month really doing well. And a lot of stuff has happened. I mean, this whole quarantine thing, things with my kids, but I've been able to kind of process both of them a little bit better, and it hasn't thrown me off track. And the only explanation I have is because I don't have all those expectations on myself anymore. I just writing because I love to write. I love to tell stories, and the rest will take care of itself. But it's hard to get to that point. Really hard.
There's this whole concept that was by Karen Horney called the tyranny of the shoulds. And it's this whole idea that we get very, very trapped in all of these things that we should do. And they're shackles.
Yeah.
And we can let them lay us down or we can let them go. And that's hard to do. Yeah. And I think it's particularly hard to do for women because we have so many things that we are intrinsically and implicitly supposed to do,
right,
according to society or our family or whoever it is.
Right.
And so I think those are some additional layers, third shift mental load things that contribute to, for women in particular, heading toward burnout.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in November, I started seeing a therapist, and so I sit down and I tell, I should be doing this and I should be doing this. And this is what, and she said, why should, is there a rule? I mean, is somebody saying you have to do these things? I'm like, no, but they're doing them. And she was like,
QTP.
Yeah, exactly. It was so, she was like, she just looked at me and I went, oh yeah, they're, and it's taken me a while, but it's sort of that thing of too, it's my choice. It's my choice. If I want to work that hard, I can, but do I want to do that? And so for me, that's helped me too, knowing that it is my choice. If I'm not doing what other people are doing, I can change it or I cannot, and just be happy with what I get done. And so, yeah, it's crazy. This business, especially right now, is just nutty.
Can make you a little crazy.
Yeah.
We wanted to ask you, because you're a research psychologist, right? I get that right? Okay, so you're a research psychologist in your non-writing life. So what recommendations or ideas would you have about writing in stressful or trying times? Because, some people will be able to really focus and write and other people won't. So what advice would you give?
I think this is going to be very dependent on kind of how you're wired. Some people need that stability, need that consistency of routine. So, if you're one of those people, try to make that routine, try to adhere to that, even though, a lot of us are working from home now with a house full of kids and husbands and dogs and whatever. Maintain whatever sense of normalcy and create a routine that you can, because you'll feel better for having that. But not everybody's like that. Some people need actual stability in the world, and obviously we don't have that right now. And if that's you, then chances are trying to push yourself to write through all of that is just going to stress you out more. And in that circumstance, I would say have a cookie project, something that you wouldn't ordinarily be working on, but it doesn't have a deadline, doesn't have any,
it's just for you, right?
Yes. Something that's just for fun, because you need the fun and the light, whatever version. I mean, you could be writing terrible post-apocalyptic zombies right now. That might be your thing, whatever. But don't, if trying to meet deadlines right now in the middle of chaos is stressing you out, then give yourself the grace not to do that. If you have, the span, if you're somebody who is working for traditional publishing and you have a legit deadline and you're worried about not meeting it, then talk to, your people and find out if there's any room in the schedule and things to move. Because I suspect there will be, because there's going to be a whole lot of things that are changing.
Yeah.
That we, don't even know about yet. But the biggest thing, because I've seen over the last few years, and actually I think I talked to Jami about this, I've seen so many people go through major life stuff, whether it was a medical thing or something going on with family or job, whatever, but serious major emotional trauma. And then they're beating their head against a wall, trying to finish whatever book they were writing at that time and not getting anywhere, even if the thing itself has passed. And what I have kind of observed is there's almost this post-traumatic stress of that experience that gets attached to that book, whatever you were working on when the thing happened. And I know quite a few people who have not been able to go back to whatever that was, because, I mean, in actuality, you are no longer the same person who was writing that book, because you had this fundamental change in who you were because of what you went through. And so a lot of writer friends that I've had, my recommendation to them was to, step aside, go work on something else. Because if you can work on something else, that kind of shows you've still got some stuff that you need to process around whatever the thing was on that original book. And I think that there's going to be a lot of that kind of thing around all of this, COVID-19 stuff. So, if you are not absolutely bound to some kind of deadline and it's going to stress you out trying to meet it, then don't. Give yourself some grace to figure out what the heck's going on with the world.
I think that's so wise. I think we all have to just sort of take a step back and look at what's important and what's not important. And I think
and sometimes the things that we think, like I prided myself on always making my deadlines because when I started, I was traditionally published and I always made my deadline. I wanted to be known as an author who was, good to work with. And I had something like that happen. And, I did not want to change that deadline and let them know that I wasn't going to be able to write that book. But I thought, okay, what's the worst that could happen? I could lose my contract. And even though that's bad, that's not the end of the world, and it's like I have to reset my own mind. And so if I have to move a deadline, it's okay. It's not, the most awful thing in the world, even though we don't like it, So a lot of it's our own mindset that we make our stress worse on ourselves. I don't know how to say it right, but we make it worse than it has to be sometimes. Yeah.
Well, we also, I think we have this implicit contract with our readers, and we are freaking out about the idea of not making them happy, not continuing, because, they have supported us through our careers and, we appreciate them. And what I have found, and this is what I did when the crap hit the fan in my life, I sent them a very honest and vulnerable email saying, y'all, this is what is going on in my life right now. I cannot finish this book. It's going to be delayed. And most people were really amazing about it. And the one or two people who were kind of jerks about it were not really my readers to begin with. And I really didn't care if they left my list.
Yeah.
By and large, readers are nice people, and we need to.
There are books for them to read. It's not like, even if I wrote fast, I could not supply them enough books for my readers because they just read so much and so fast. So
exactly.
That's really good. So what things have you seen that you used to do that you don't do anymore because you think that's not worth my
time? Let me think. Facebook parties, anything that involves excessive time on social media. I've never seen any conclusive data that it sells books. I mean, there are various and sundry passive means of getting your name and your book covers out there that don't require that same amount of hands-on time and effort that are probably going to have a bigger impact on your bottom line. For me personally, pursuing traditional publishing, back when I started this in 2010, I only intended to put out some novellas to build an audience for the series I wanted to sell to New York. And then I kind of walked that path for a while and found out that the entire ecosystem of traditional publishing was incredibly toxic to my creative process. Not to mention I've watched them continue to make really dumb business decisions year after year, like DRM and the thing with the libraries, charging out more out the yin-yang for ebooks than paperbacks. It's so clear that decisions are not being made by book people, but by business people with no understanding of publishing or readers. And with the fact that there's been a shift in marketing such that authors are more responsible for their own marketing no matter which path they choose, it just seemed kind of foolish to me to split my profits with any sort of middleman when I can do just as good a job hiring freelancers and get my books out faster if I'm staying on the indie publishing track. And then covers. I taught myself in the beginning, I taught myself Photoshop, and I'm better than adequate, but I can finally really afford a truly talented graphic designer, and there is no substitute for that kind of polish.
There's not.
Yeah. I love Lori Jackson. She's my cover artist. She's amazing and glorious, and I will never go back.
Your covers are amazing. I mean, they just exactly tell what your books are about. Like, you look at your covers and you know exactly what you're getting. They're amazing. Yeah, they're really great. I love them. So, what mistakes have you made that turned out to be a good thing?
Let's see. Probably, and this is going to seem weird, but not jumping on the ads bandwagon or worrying about promo stacking. This was one of those areas where I didn't follow the crowd. I didn't learn Facebook ads and Amazon ads and BookBub ads when everybody else was. I built my entire fan base and reached a 6-figure income using nothing but paid newsletters and free forms of promo.
Wow.
And my tactics have always surrounded, the long tail, consistent promotion to drive natural spikes in the sales cycle. And just remembering it's a long haul game. And so it's about a sustainable level of income instead of ranking. Now I'm wide, so that makes ranking is kind of irrelevant for me. That's a very different business in KU. But like my method is they're not flashy. They're not getting me at the top of bestseller list, but from a making a living standpoint, they're very, very effective. Right. And then probably going free too early. The prevailing wisdom is that like you don't put the first book free until you have like 3 or more titles. And wishful, I think I put the first book free when book 3 came out. With Misfit Inn, I did it as soon as book 2 came out because book 3 was supposed to come out and then life happened. And I just left it, perma free for years. And like I've given away 2 million free books.
Wow.
Across multiple series since I started. And a lot of people look at those as lost sales, and that's not the right way to look at it because there's no guarantee that any of the, a bunch of those people would have bought it. But it meant I've had a ton of organic growth from my fan base without spending a dime on marketing for a long, long time. And eventually I hit a real tipping point in the size of my organic fan base that combined with the massive 8-book a year output, like really pushed to this massive exponential growth for my career. So, I had the luxury to do that because I had a full-time job. I was not dependent upon my writing income to support me. And so there are a lot of business decisions that I was able to make and really invest my money back in the business that I wouldn't have been able to make otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. We had an interview with Nathan Van Coops and talked about how writing is not his full-time income and it gives him flexibility and ability to do different things that if it's your full-time income, you may kind of be hamstrung in some ways. It's a different perspective that I don't think we think about a lot. So, yeah.
Well, and with free book, that goes to read through. Like we did a podcast earlier and we were talking about read through. And when you have a free book, especially if you're wide, then that just, like you said, it's organic growth of people. So people who get it and read on, those are the people that really love your books. And you're just looking more hands. I think that's really, that's so smart. But I see what you're saying. You felt like you did it a little bit too early, but then it turned out okay.
Well, I mean, it was kind of one of those, like, they say that you don't do it this way. And I didn't really listen to I don't know that I even knew that they were saying that at the time that I did it. I was just kind of like, I'm going to try this because this is what I have. I didn't have money to spend. So I was like, what do I have in my hands that I can do something with? And that was these free books. And so that was what I did. And particularly before KU came out and, the ecosystem very much changed, like it made an enormous difference to my visibility to have all those free books out there because, it meant there was like no bar for people actually trying my stuff.
Do you still have all those books free?
I've rotated. The first book of Wishful went back to paid for the first time since 2014. I think back in November, because eventually you reach a point where you have saturated the lists where I, keep promoting things. And so right now I'm on kind of I've got a rotating schedule. And I think I have like four, well, more than that free right now because I got a book bub on something earlier this week.
Yeah.
But I think I have a website page on my website that lists whatever my current freebies are. So there's always something for people to try.
Yeah, we'll link to that. What about the opposite? What did you ever have what you thought was like this super great, brilliant idea, and then it turned out to not be that great?
I thought that building multiple series at once would be a great thing.
Me too.
Right?
I think you're my long lost cousin or something because I keep going, I'm like that. I'm input. Yeah. I'm learner.
I thought it would be a good thing, but it really just split my focus and meant that I built my fan base a bit slower than if I'd stuck with the same series and finished it in a consecutive fashion. But that said, from a creative standpoint, I needed the ability to cycle and to jump from one thing to another because otherwise I was getting bored. Mm-hmm. So I think you have to look at the payoff, like from a financial standpoint, okay, that was a little, not so much. But from a personal creative standpoint, I think it was still the right call for me.
Yeah. Yeah. What I found was I had this brilliant idea where I thought, okay, I'll have 4 series going and I'll have a release each quarter in each series, and that will make a wonderful year. So I tried that. And
that way.
No, I didn't write fast enough to do it. And by the time I finished one and got my brain out of one series and into another, it was so hard for me to transition. I like the break sometimes, but it slowed me down to transition. Yeah. So that was what I had trouble with. But it's a great theory. Maybe somebody else will make it work.
I think it's something that would have worked in the old days before indie publishing, like when you had the way that traditional publishing worked for years and years and years. But indie publishing has, because things can be released quickly, it has completely changed the publishing landscape and reader expectations, and they want things more faster now.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, that's true. So what changes, speaking of that, what changes have you seen in your genre or in the writing world over the course of your career? And how have you adapted to them?
Well, for one, romance has taken over indie publishing land, and traditional publishing has mostly like thrown their hands up and relinquished it because they just can't compete, which is an enormous change, because for years and years and years, romance is what kept the lights on in New York.
Yeah.
But, because again, they keep making dumb decisions, and we're over here like selling reasonably priced books and people are devouring them like candy. What are they going to do with that? One of the other things, novellas that, did not used to be a thing because they were not from a print base. They don't make a lot of financial sense. They've become a thing again. Short form fiction has really come back into its own in a way it can't in traditional publishing, because traditional publishing is really the paper business and not the book business. I think things are, since I started in this in 2010, there's just been exponential changes in the whole thing, because it was very much that whole curve that you see with like the early adopters and the kind of going up. And then we had that big boom around like 2012, 2013, where you had people making like insane amounts of money, and then the bubble burst. And, then there was that whole Chicken Little, the sky is falling. Oh my God, indie publishing is going to die. I'm like, no, it's not. Y'all just chill. And as like, it means you're going to, I was like, it means we're going to have to change our tactics and how we do things. But that is the nature of the business, because it's a tech business,
right? In
a lot of ways. And so there's going to consistently be a lot of changes, and the people who will survive are the ones who are willing to adapt. Right. Instead of spending a bunch of time whinging about, it doesn't work the way it used to.
Yeah.
Lots of things don't. That's life.
Can't do much about that. So as we wrap up, tell us what you think the one thing is that you've done to set yourself up for success in your career.
Probably. So when I, because when I was first starting out and I was working the 3 jobs and whatnot, and time was extremely limited, I learned extremely early on that I cannot do all the things, and that I had to prioritize the thing that would make the needle move the most. And so for a long, long time, that meant I didn't worry about anything but the writing, because obviously you can't promote something you haven't written. Right. And then my next big thing, I focused on building my website, improving the look and feel. And then I focused on building a newsletter for several years. And like in our industry, there's a whole lot of people that are running around like chickens with their heads cut off, because, we're supposed to do all of these things, but it's just not realistic, and it's absolutely crazy making. So, you really have to pick where you put your focus and spend concentrated work time on that thing. Learn to do it well instead of splitting your attention and doing a crappy job at a lot of things. And so I have less struggle with the shoulds and supposed tos, because I had years and years ago learned I just can't do that. And so it's less crazy making. And so, when I see other people having a flail, I can wait and be like, honey, calm down. It's okay.
You say it with that Southern accent, it helps too.
Exactly. Oh, that's great. So Kait, tell people where they can find you.
They can find out more about me at my website, kaitnolan.com. That's KAIT Nolan.com. And all of my relevant links are there.
Okay, great. Right. And you're on all the platforms.
I am.
All right. That's great. Well, thanks for being with us. This has been really fun.
It has been fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we enjoyed talking to you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.